Good morning. It is August 23rd, 2023. We're here for our regular scheduled county commissioner meeting. All three commissioners are present. We have our administrator, Mr. Gonzalez, and our clerk of the board. So at this time, I'll call the meeting to order and ask everybody to please rise and join in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on the agenda is the vouchers. I believe we have one today.
We have two.
We have two.
Yeah. Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $896,221.42 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed, cited by two representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm looking at a copy of the fund expenditures. It does not show a review or signature by the county administrator. Is there one that does? Okay, great, thank you. Second?
Been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Move for approval of salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll in a total amount of $1,218,367.15 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office.
Second?
Been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we'll move down to the consent agenda. There are 6 items on the consent agenda today.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 through 6 as presented.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second for the 6 consent items. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Moves us down to a certificate of appreciation. On behalf of Franklin County, I would like to express our gratitude for your faithful service with the Franklin County RV Park as the managers from 2004 when the RV park first opened, then as a camp host through September 4th of 2023. Your contributions to our county and your years of service have been invaluable. Please accept the certificate of appreciation for your dedication and professionalism. We hope you know just how much we respect you and have valued you as a colleague. You will be missed at Franklin County. And this is for Mr. and Mrs. Tyrell. Thank you so much. Would you please come forward? Well, here you go, and if you'd like to say a few words, please help yourself. Maybe some commissioners, some other.
I don't talk, but we work. But I don't talk.
We
Thank
just
you.
appreciate you.
Thank you.
For everything you've done.
Thank you.
I have one little. They were there when the park opened, but they were actually worked for Track when it opened. So since 1995, they've been there 28 years,
Wow.
long time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seen it grow. You've seen this whole city grow.
Yeah. Is there any other commissioners that'd like to say anything?
Just want to say thank you for all your work and time and efforts. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, well, that moves us down to regular business. And the first is Resolution 2023-239, Franklin County RV Park Camp Host 2023 contract, presented by Susan Grant.
We have a new camp host that will replace Bob and Joyce, David and Debbie Faith. They've been in the community for 20 years too. I think they'll do a great job. Do you have any questions?
Questions, commissioners?
Just a couple, if I might. These services are after hours, they're not the daytime management. Do we provide them things like a little golf cart or four-wheeler or anything so they can get around the park? Or do they? So maybe you could just speak briefly to what their function is then, what they do
So
there.
they check in and out guests after hours, weekends, things when the RV park is closed. They do the janitorial duties in the restrooms and the laundry areas. And they, keep their eyes open, make sure it's all clean, make sure the guests are happy, things like that after hours.
We provide them with the necessary cleaning materials and supplies and things.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Mullen?
When you say after hours, how late do they go?
Well, guests sometimes come in.
Right?
But
No,
usually
that's why I'm asking. I was just curious.
I'll vet it out where I'll call the person and I say, hey, you're going to be here at 7, you're going to be at 6. So people usually know where they're going, but there's times when somebody just comes in, they're passing through, and they just need a night to stay. So, yeah, they've been known to be up at maybe 9, 10 o'clock sometimes.
All right,
But,
thank
yeah.
you.
So I know we do this for a space.
Yes.
It's in trade.
Yes.
And I don't know if we should table this for the time being and go month to month with White Leisure now being the manager, just so we don't get in conflict with anything that they might be doing with the RV park, because they're going to be managing that also.
I spoke to HWL yesterday. They did express interest in having a stake in that in terms of management and looking at some of the numbers to see if there was any financial opportunities out there. On one hand, I think it's a bargain what we're getting, for the return on investment is good, and I think it's something good for the county to have eyes on there. But I do think there needs to be some alignment or at least conversation with HWL, because I didn't know they had that interest in the RV park to take a look at the financials and see where there might be some shortcomings or some opportunities there. While I think month to month would probably be good, and then once we get to that decision point, whether it's long term and what that looks like, and so I think it would be wise just so we're all on the same page in terms of they're not walking into something that, if they wind up managing that area, that handcuffs them is my
Right.
first takeaway.
That's my concern.
Yeah.
And I think that we work with them on a month to month, and so we'll table this for this
Mr.
week.
Chairman, point of order.
Point of order, Commissioner Peck.
This is really board discussion on the merits of this decision. It's not the chair's decision to table the matter. I have additional concerns that need to be heard publicly.
And not making a decision, Commissioner Peck, we are discussing that do we want to get into a one-year lease?
Well, if I
exchange?
misheard, I apologize.
Excuse me, Commissioner Peck, I have the floor. You don't step on people that's why we need this code of ethics, because,
Mr. Chairman, point of order again.
Point of order.
You misrepresented, I believe, what I did. You, I believe, said, we will table this matter, and that's what prompted the point of order. And actually, I have the floor to speak to it until it's time for a decision. I'll leave it go there, but there
You
is still
better
discussion.
leave it go there, because you stepped on me when I was talking, Commissioner
I'm
Peck.
sorry.
And this is going to stop. This is why we're going to, Mr. Gonzalez, I want the code of conduct back up. We want to have our meeting or our workshop on this, and we want to get this done. Continue, Commissioner Peck.
So this ASR says it was coordinated with Jeff Briggs and legal. Mr. Briggs tells me that's not the case. The code of conduct that was previously submitted also showed that Mr. Briggs not only had reviewed it, but endorsed it. That was not the case. So I would ask coming back to this particular one, that we send this back to legal for a proper review. There are a number of questions, not the least of which is that Washington law and federal tax law speak to the distinction between employees and contractors. There are a number of tests that are lined out in statute that you can simply read and answer yes or no. One of those is, does the contractor set their own hours? No, they don't. Does the contractor supply their own materials? No, Ms. Grant just told us that the county provides cleaning materials and equipment as part of the contract. And there are several other tests there as well. The issue is important more than just the mere question of coordination, in that the liability for the county is different, I believe, when we have a contract with a true legal contractor versus an employee. It also extends to, should that contractor be injured on the job, will Labor and Industries cover them, and will it be at the county's expense? And if it's later determined that they never met the test to be an independent contractor and were in fact, employees, the county would then, I believe, be liable for contributions to PERS, to Labor and Industries, and to other expenses that maybe haven't been done in years. And so I appreciate the past service and the way it's been done. I believe the county has benefited from that. But I think this is a natural time, with a break between the contracts, to actually look at all these, what I think are significant questions, because they bear directly on the county's liability if someone gets hurt in that park. And the fact that Mr. Briggs is listed as coordination gave me some peace about it, until I spoke with his office this morning and found out that, in fact, he has no recollection of having seen or coordinated on this. So while I do agree that this is a matter that isn't ready to go forward today, my recommendation is that we refer it back to the legal office for, in fact, a coordination. Thank you.
Commissioner Mullen?
I'm in agreement. I think we should turn it back to legal to have them further review it.
I too agree, so I think that the tabling should happen, and I would like to recognize that since 2008, when Commissioner Peck has took office, that he's finally come to the realization that this needs to be looked at, so I agree too. So I think we should table this until next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I do not agree with your decision to table. I think we should refer this back to legal for an appropriate legal review, however much time that takes. That might be next week, it might be the week after. And there's also the attendant questions about the new contractor coming in. And I would like to know, since I don't recall, whether or not the RFP that we put out on the street for management of the Hapo Center did or did not include management of this RV park. They are different accounts and different funds, so they're separate entities. Mr. Gonzalez, do you recall?
I don't think the RFP specifically named the RV park, and as I stated, there was interest in them managing it. You know, whether that is possible is something I can talk to Jeff about. You know, whether that goes outside the scope of the RFP or it's some other management function they can have. I simply don't know. I wanted to express that just in full transparency, that they had mentioned that. You know, they had obviously looked at the RV park and looked at some of the numbers and thought there could be some revenue generation there for the county, because I think what we're charging is pretty below market rate, and there's some opportunity to perhaps increase the rates that, you know, maybe don't meet, you know, private market value, but at least get us in the ball game to generate some revenue. But so it was a discussion. I don't think it was anything that was set in stone. But in regards to the tabling, however you want to work it, I'll work with Jeff. And
Yeah, I'm saying table it so that legal can look at it, so
Yeah.
we can bring it back at a later date, next week, the week after. I'm just saying that we table it, which is what you do when you don't make a decision, and we go through the process of what we
Yeah,
got to
and
do.
I think that's the best bet, and yeah, we'll look at every facet.
The other thing is I asked SVM if they were managing the ice arena. I know that this is a separate entity from the ice arena, but they said they were managing the ice arena also. So are they managing the RV park also?
No, I don't think they specifically are. Shirley Jones works with Suzanne and coordinates. So it was my assumption when I read the ASR that she had talked to you, because she had talked to me about this particular process, and I had talked to Suzanne about it. So I'm surprised that Shirley hadn't talked to you about it at all.
If I could just speak on it briefly.
Absolutely.
It does look like, just looking at the proposed agreement here, that Mr. Stover in our office must have signed off on it. I see Dan Stover's signature on it, so that may have been.
Okay, yeah,
Part of the
and
confusion.
I could have sworn that she said that she coordinated with your office, maybe not you specifically, but because Shirley's usually pretty attention to detail, so I was surprised when Commissioner Peck said that she did not.
She may have, and then.
Reached
and
out
it
to
was
your office.
routed To Mr. Stover.
Okay,
And then in terms of the RFP, I don't believe it covered the RV park. And certainly they could manage that, but as Mr. Peck said, separate contract, separate agreement wasn't part of the RFP process. So I understand his concerns there. But it's something that could, I guess, be explored. in the
right,
future.
yeah, and that's what was my thinking when I spoke to them yesterday. Was, perhaps it's outside of the scope or something separate, but it was more of a conversation about perhaps managing that or at least looking at the numbers, because they're gonna take a financial look at what's happening there before they actually step in. So it's going to be a part of the equation.
And the last bit I guess I would comment on is the code of ethics. I think that, again, my advice has been that I think Robert's Rules provides a sufficient basis to, provide for the sort of needs I think that the commissioners were looking for. And so my advice has always been that Robert's Rules would probably be the way if we wanted to adopt something like that to go that route rather than to reinvent the wheel.
Thank you. Okay, so
And Mr. Briggs, since when you came up, the county administrator engaged you directly, so I'll take the same privilege. I just wanted to make clear on the record that the agenda summary report in the coordination block has your name, and that does appear to be the disconnect, is that they put the wrong name in there, and therefore we didn't know that there was coordination. So I appreciate you clearing that up. Thank you.
Thank you.
all right, so at this time, if it's the will of the board, we will table this until further date.
Sounds good. Thank you. And I'll be in touch, Suzanne. We'll work with Jeff.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Peck.
you said if it's the will of the board, and you didn't have the privilege of hearing from the board, so I will offer my support for tabling it to a future date. Previously, you had said table it to next week. That was the nature of the concern. I don't know that 1 week's going to be enough, so I appreciate you changing that to table it to a future date, and I support.
But Mr. Gonzalez, I think that we continue with these people managing the RV park for the time being then?
I'll defer to legal because, some questions were brought up. Since there's been precedent, I don't see any problem with it, in that regard. If Commissioner
don't
Peck
have a-
brought up some good points. If they do get
Yep.
injured and, there's not an agreement in place, where does
Right.
that put the county? So I have some trepidations about that, to sort of orally put them in charge. I think until we have a real agreement, maybe put everything on hold and say, look, in the interim, we've got to figure out when the park is not managed by Susan, can't stay there 24 hours a day. So, obviously we need some help, and good folks just retired, so we're in a bit of a pickle. So, that's kind of what we face. So I think what we can do is I can talk with Jeff offline and kind of get a strategy and maybe come to the board next Tuesday.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I'll talk to Suzanne and kind of figure out if we can figure out something in the interim where, if I got to go out there at night, or, we'll figure something out.
Okay. All right. We'll move down to public hearing ordinance 06-2023, amending the FCC 17.66.020B, swimming pool barriers. So at this time, I'll open the public hearing. Mr. Bratton, go ahead.
Yes. Yes, this is back in February, I came to the board regarding requests from applicants and stuff with regard to utilizing automatic pool covers as the only barrier with regard to swimming pools. At that, and that purpose was to seek guidance from the board as to whether or not they wanted us to amend it to reflect that desire by the public. In that meeting, in the discussion, it was determined, and the board asked that we take it and maintain a secondary barrier, but lower the current code from 5 foot, or that was in place, from 5 foot down to 4 foot, bringing it more in line with the IBC and the standard fence sizes available out there. So that's what this is. This is the request to amend the swimming pool barrier requirement and reduce it from 5 foot to 4 foot. No other changes are proposed on this item. And happy to answer any questions.
Questions, commissioners?
Mr. Bratton, working from memory, it's been several months, but ISPSC, International Swimming Pool Safety Code?
Yes.
I
Or, I'm sorry, no, it's
was going to say, I don't even-
International Swimming Pool Code or
SC. It
yeah,
doesn't
it's
matter.
that thing, yes.
But the reason for the question is not to embarrass myself and test my own poor memory. The purpose was that there is an international code, and the proposal, if approved, would put us in compliance with that code. The current standard we're using actually exceeds that code by virtue of a 5-foot fence instead of 4.
Correct, and which is perfectly fine. Local jurisdictions can always go above as
Sure.
far as safety and health, but they cannot go below. So that's the, yeah, and when I said IBC is the
Building Code.
overall
Yeah.
arching
International Building
title.
Code, sure.
Yeah, for all of these different types of codes.
And had you said IBC, I wouldn't have had a question, but when I saw
Yeah.
ISPSC, I
That's
just
the specific subset.
want to make sure it was an established, adopted code.
It is.
For liability purposes.
Yep.
We want our code to be compliant with a standard. And my recollection is from our previous discussion, and this ASR, I think, supports the notion that the board felt that an automatic pool cover by itself was not sufficient, that we wanted a fence as well, and we're agreeing to go from a 5-foot, which exceeds the national standard, to a 4-foot. One, because it is compliant with the code, and two, because it turns out that local builders who make fence make 4 foot, 6 foot, 8 foot, but not 5. So it potentially reduces costs.
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that I had all that right from our previous discussions. Thank you.
Commissioner Mullen?
I have no questions about it.
What is the Washington State Building Code?
The Washington State Building Code, okay, so like in most or a lot of jurisdictions or states that adopt the IBC as their code base.
Again, IBC, International
National
Building
Building
Code.
Code.
We're going with the International Building Code. Our Washington State Building Code says what?
They take that set of codes and then review them on the 3-year updates, and then they make state changes. In fact, Washington State makes so many changes to the IBC that if not last year, this next cycle coming up, the IBC, or the ICC, the International Code Council, is actually producing a separate book, because right now it's you have these annotations all throughout the document when you order them.
So are we in compliance with the Washington State Building Code?
Yes, we are.
With this? Okay.
Yes, it's the changes are minor tweaks throughout the code. In fact, like the IBC adopted the standard with the swimming pools and stuff, I believe in 2015. Washington State, I believe, adopted that whole book as a standard in 2018. You know, it's these kinds of things. And then
Yeah.
some, prime example is in Washington State, we do not use the International Plumbing Code. We still use the Uniform Plumbing Code. I don't know why or whatever, but so that's a little difference. Most
Gotcha.
places use the International Building Code. And again, international, this is a code developed in America. It's not, and it's called international because we're trying to get the rest of the world to adopt it.
Gotcha. Is there any other comments from commissioners? This is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak on this? Anybody on the phone? No. Seeing nobody come forward, I'm going to close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
Move to approve ordinance 06-2023 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for ordinance 06-2023. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we'll move down to the public hearing on ordinance 07-2023, proposed text amendment to Title 17, Section 17.58.008F, Franklin County Development Regulations. So at this time, I'll open the public hearing. Mr. Bratton.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a request. There's a bit of a history with this. I'll go over it real brief. Long story short, the applicant presented this back in 2020. The timing, we moved it all the way to the Planning Commission, went to the Planning Commission, got a recommendation. Then I had my medical issues, and then we got hit with the 2018 Energy Code. It got dropped. And the applicant brought it to our attention. You know, they were asking about it, and we went, oh, my God. So that's where we're at here. We did go back out due to changes on the Planning Commission and things like that. And the nature of this type of an amendment, we did, you know, quasi-judicial items have a one-touch. Legislative items can go back and forth. There's no timeline associated with those. So in the it was brought back to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission, when I asked some questions and stuff, it was clear that they weren't still knowledgeable. Long story short, I didn't want them to make a judgment without going back through the process because how much time had gone by, and the fact that about half the Planning Commission was different than the ones that were originally sitting. So we bring it back, and that kind of catches us up to where we are today. It is a countywide change, and it's seeking to change the open space minimum requirements for a planned unit development from 35% to 15%. It brings this, their reasoning is that it's closer in line to nearby jurisdictions, along with increasing the viability of PUDs as an option for developers. It also increases the amount of PUDs because if they don't have to set aside such a big amount of space, they may be able to accommodate different uses. And I'll get into a little bit about kind of what this would look like on the ground. This is public agency noticing. Like I said, we initiated this back in 2020. Then we actually hit this twice because right then was also when COVID was hitting and there was concern that agencies were out of the office, this stuff. So we moved it forward. It finally got before the Planning Commission initially in November of 2020. But too much time had gone by, so we kind of reset the process. Okay, I'm not sure. No, I'm on the wrong side there. So what does planned unit development do? It allows for more flexibility in development. You could have mixed uses, you could have residential and retail, restaurants, you could have just residential. I mean, but what's different is whereas a subdivision is what we call prescriptive, there's rules in place, this is how you shall do it, this is this, that, a planned unit development almost is often a pilot project and or just an alternative style, like maybe you're doing cluster housing where you have them close together, but then you've got the rest of the properties open space. That's what planned unit developments generally are for. And it's more of a discussion. So what happens is the applicant will come in and then staff and the developers will kind of like look at what's going on, the property characteristics, things like that, and then work together to come up with this plan. But there's some limitations, and it's not just open season. What happens is, even though it may be flexible, the number of residential units per minute is limited to that number normally allowed within the zone, unless specific requirements are met. That will allow for a limited density increase. However, that density increase maxes out at 20%. So, how does this play out? In a 10-acre site, 1 acre minimums, because that's the underlying zoning is RC1, you can build 10 units. But maybe you want to take those 10 units and shove them on one half of the property, and each of those lots is only 8 or a half an acre. You've done your set aside of the property, you get your bonus, so now you can build up to, in this case, 12 half-acre lots on that 10-acre property. But you don't get to double it. You don't get to, it's the number of units. The biggest thing that's flexible here is the size of the individual lots. But your number count, other than the 20% potential, but it's also not guaranteed that they get that. Just because they do it doesn't mean it's still at the discretion of the board with regard to whether or not they want to do those. Basically grant that exact amount or how they want to work that thing, the density increases. But at worst, it's a 20%. At most, it's a 20% increase. And, other jurisdictions, only Franklin County has the requirement of 35%. Most jurisdictions either have no percentage or 15%. Grant County is at 30%. City of Pasco requires 15%. Yakima, Spokane require 10%. And this is kind of what this is a very basic example of the difference. So on a 35, it matters, the numbers don't really change. It's still 30, the same number of units would be permitted on the property under the 15% or the 35% scenario. But what you do end up with is more space, actually, potentially, because more of the property can be used for housing or yards, things like that. And again, it doesn't really change. The change from 35 to 15 doesn't change the number, doesn't allow for more units. It just creates the ability to use more of the area for that. Another caveat that folks should understand is the open space is not public open space unless the developer and or the landowners decide they want to open it to the public. This is the set aside is for the enjoyment of the neighborhood residents unless otherwise defined in the subdivision when it's finalized. So, and please, anytime if you got questions to ask.
Questions?
So Derek, state legislature, in their effort to create more of what they call middle housing, has made some really substantial changes in the last year.
Yeah.
One of them is ADUs, accessory dwelling units, potentially up to 2 with a single home. So I'm presuming that each of those bluish purple squares could have two ADUs with them, and that would generally comply. We'd still have setback issues, we'd still have septic issues, they'd still need to meet all those requirements, but the point is that when you go from a 35% open space to a 15% open space, you relax the area, you give more space around each of those dwellings, which further enables the developer to take advantage of recent changes in state law with ADUs. If you've got a 35% open space requirement, it's going to be really tough to take advantage of some of these new statutes. So that's one of the benefits of this that I have not heard anyone speak to. And again, you got to meet the septic and zoning and everything else if the properties are big enough, but
The biggest change for our regulations regarding ADUs and what's required in the state is that we require a CUP in 2 acres. The state regulations effectively, and I have to double check because there's a bunch of them out there. Some are only city, and then some are city and county. And
Right.
and then of course we have options. You know, we can opt into some, and some were mandated. So, but we already allow in all residential units an allowance of an attached ADU up to 800 square foot. That's permitted by right. I mean, assuming the structure supports it and everything.
So if you would then, for a future meeting, if you come back to us and articulate whether or not the new state law drives changes for us, because I absolutely believe it does.
I do too.
I
I'm
was-
just not sure which
I was
ones
there
yet.
when they, I was there when they debated it and when they passed it, and,
Yeah, I'm just
and,
not sure which ones
you know,
yet.
historically, our ADUs, you know, really have had to be connected by some sort of a physical structure, like a covered walkway or something.
That's an attached ADU.
Well,
Yeah.
right.
But
And-
we also allow for detached
And so,
1,600 if you've
so
got 2
I'm making a
acres. Yeah.
distinction here that these are not attached ADUs that are right up close to the primary residence. They're ADUs that can be separate. And back to my point, going from 35% to 15% relaxes and increases the space around each of the individual properties, which enhances the ability to build these ADUs, which is something that we couldn't have done at this scale in the past because the law didn't allow it at the state, and because we wouldn't have had the physical space around each of these. So I'm just highlighting that this actually is going to be very helpful for people to take advantage of new ADU laws that literally are less than a year old.
And I do have my staff analyzing that, and we're getting that stuff geared up because we know we got to move on it. So we'll, if not before, you'll probably be seeing that stuff. I'll be doing the report before, but I mean regulatory proposals in early, next year.
Yeah, and a second quick item, which is, if memory serves, there's been a change in the administrative approval for short plats out of your office, and the number has increased. Have you seen that?
What do you mean?
I'll talk, well, right now, if somebody wants to do a short plat, there's a limit on the number of
Right.
units or lots that can be done administratively through your office, and I think the state has just increased that
Oh.
number substantially. If I, don't hold me to this, but I want to say like even maybe up to 20.
Is this by mandate or is it by?
Let's
because
have
we'll
that
talk
conversation
later, yeah.
offline. But it comes back to this issue that we have on the table, and whether or not these planned unit developments would come under that guidance and give you and your office administrative authority for approving these. So two big changes that we should talk about maybe more offline.
Okay.
Thanks.
So Derek, you made mention that it would have to come before the board to be approved. It will go through the planning and building department, or the planning first, right?
Yeah, once we get the kind of the plan in place, then all that gets vetted just like a normal subdivision.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question I got with ADUs, parking. If you start putting all these people in one lot, and is there anything in there about cars and parking and?
Well, in our standards, yes. When you
Okay.
build an ADU, you have to build another off-street parking space.
Okay.
There has to be one for each of the units.
Yes, because if you have a house with, a lot of children and they're all driving, they all got cars, you were talking about a lot of cars.
That was, yep.
That's all figured in there, okay. continue.
Oh,
Unless
okay.
Commissioner Mullen has any questions.
So on this open space being shrunk down to 15%, I'm assuming that that would allow for probably larger homes, more expensive homes being built,
Potentially,
potentially?
yeah.
So that that would raise the tax value. Is that correct?
You mean, yeah, well, the assessed value of the county would be increased, yeah.
The county for, I guess, higher-end homes?
Yeah, it's the reality, in this type of scenario, I don't think you would see much differential in the price points regarding the houses. Because again, it could do that. It could also be that they're building smaller units, more cluster style housing. They're, with lots of open space. I mean, it's really up to the developer.
All right, okay, thank you.
And Derek, just following on that same line of reasoning, if this draws larger, more expensive, more valuable, higher assessed homes, that doesn't actually increase our tax revenue. It merely does a shift. And so these higher end homes, bigger homes would be paying a bigger piece of the tax. The collateral benefit, and perhaps this is what my fellow commissioner was driving at, I'm not sure, but the collateral benefit could then be that some of the median and lower priced homes could see some tax relief, some benefit because of bigger homes taking on a larger share. Because we all know that, these bigger homes aren't going to bring more tax, they're just going to
It
create a
increases,
shift.
yeah, it
Right,
increases
yeah.
the assessed value of the county, but not necessarily tax burdens or
Yeah,
anything like
but
that.
I think there is that,
Or revenues.
that benefit, that potential for lower end, economically speaking, homes to see some tax relief as these pick up more.
Yep.
Another good reason to support it, I think.
You got any more?
Yeah.
Please
Sorry.
continue.
So, the staff analysis, basically their reasoning is a lot of what we've been discussing. It's open space goals because now we've got people that actually are going to be creating or define potentially open space as opposed to it being neighborhoods that just don't have open space. If you look along, for example, the shoreline, you don't see any recreational areas except for those that are natural out there. There may be small areas, but in this scenario, with a planned unit development, you're going to have an open area that's for the residents at a minimum to enjoy. They can walk their dogs, they can whatever, or they could turn it into a fully functioning like playground, gazebos. I mean, that type of stuff is totally up to them. But, they say that when you build a house that fronts on a park, now this is kind of old data, but maybe I would assume it's still accurate to a degree. The value of the house is up by 20%. Can be 20% more than a comparable home that's not fronting on a open space or park. Because basically they adopt that as their yard. So, so we believe that it would encourage more developments if there was a smaller set aside as far as a PUD specific style development. We also, because again, this would help them pencil out their developments a little better, potentially because they can and they have a rational justification for creating smaller lots, which means you have higher or an easier ability to, your costs between units, like infrastructure costs, are reduced in those circumstances the closer together. I mean, there's just a lot of flexibility that allows them to work the project to better pencil out for them. And then it would also make us more in line with the surrounding jurisdictions, which, it's not a requirement or anything else, but it does make the life of contractors and developers easier because they almost all work in multiple jurisdictions. And if there's consistency across the board, it's easier for them to just work in those different jurisdictions. We received comments from the following technical agencies regarding this proposal, but, PUD thought we were actually doing a PUD and then realized, oh, wait, no, we're good. So they withdrew their comment. So recommended findings of fact, it is in accord with the goals and policies of the Franklin County Comprehensive Plan. The effect of the proposal will not be material detrimental. There's merit and value in the proposal for the community as a whole. Conditions are not required to be imposed in order to mitigate any significant adverse impacts. A concomitant agreement that would come out at the time of actually PUD discussion or design, if that was needed at the time. All notifications of the public hearing were posted as per county ordinance and state law. And that's my presentation. I do have a suggested motion. If you have any questions.
Is there
I'd be
any other
happy to answer.
questions?
I have no questions.
This is a public hearing, so is there anybody in the public that would like to speak on this? Please come forward.
I apologize. My chronic bronchitis was kind of affected by the smoke, so I may cough occasionally, but it's only bronchitis. My name is Robert Carasino. I live at 130 Terrace Drive, Franklin County, Washington. And I'm speaking for myself and many, many neighbors who are opposed to this proposed change. First of all, I think that there's a problem with the administrative action to take this change. The materials that were submitted by the planning department did not include my June 18th, 2023 comment letter that was submitted to the Planning Commission and to yourselves as well, which objected to this on a number of reasons. It added a new reason to the earlier comments that I had submitted on June 6th, which that letter was included in the packet materials that you looked at. But primarily, the citizens are concerned that the practical effect of what's being proposed is different from the technical effect that Mr. Bratton talked about. And I generally am always supportive of Mr. Bratton's opinions. I think in this case, there's just a disconnect in what we see is happening as a result of this. People move into the area between Sagemore and Dent Road because it is a county-like atmosphere, having a lower density of housing, larger lots, and it's a feeling of open space. Those large 1 acre minimum size lots themselves create a lot of open space. By changing the requirement for the amount of open space land that is going to be required in a planned unit development, it practically will make it more likely that land will be developed as a planned unit development, and the developer will try to take advantage of the authorization to have 20% more housing units on a specific piece of property that is allowed by the planned unit development. Currently, the regulation is written in a way that has both benefits and costs to a developer. The cost is having a large amount of open space that's available in the thing. When you only make a change to the amount of open space that's required and reduce it significantly from 35% to 15%, and don't change any of the offsetting takes, the gives and takes that are associated with the current PUD rule, you're going to encourage developers to use the PUD process. And the example that Mr. Bracken gave us about the number of additional units can be developed, I'm not sure that was entirely correct. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that you have like a 100-acre area. Currently, the 1 acre minimum zoning allows you to practically put in maybe 92 lots because you have to set aside land for the roadways. Planned unit development rules, though, allow you to put in 120% of the 1 acre lots that are theoretically allowable. So you can put in 120 housing units. So you're going from 92 units to 120 housing units, which is really more like a 38% increase in density over a given piece of property. So people that have spent substantial amounts of money to buy lots and develop houses in the area around Fanning Road, both north and south, including the very nice development that Randy Mullen put in place to the north of Fanning Road. Very nice large lots. Those houses, and I disagree with the discussion that was given here about maybe higher end houses going into the PUD. That's not the case. The houses that are being built on these large lots are the higher cost houses. People are paying $300,000 for one of those acre plus lots, and they're putting on houses that are costing $800,000, $900,000, $1 million to build. There's just a house that just sold, not on the river, I'm talking about away from the river, just on the areas that might have some view, but blocks away from the river. One just recently sold for $1.48 million. A couple of years ago, one sold for $1.2 million. So if you're thinking that you're going to get higher end houses in a PUD, that's not the case. You're going to be detracting from the river corridor area by making this change. It also creates an inconsistency with one of the goals of the commission to try and assure in that area that there's more access by the public to the river. That's a current requirement that you apply now to subdivisions. But PUDs allow the open space to be used just by the people in that individual development. So as we move forward here to continue the process of suburbanization of the area between Dent Road and Sagemore Farms that is covered by your allowances for residential development, you're going to get to the point where people are going to say, what is happening here? Now we've got the area all covered by houses, but we don't have any access to the river for the general public. I mean, if you happen to be in the individual development near the river that has some open space available to their citizens, you may have some access. But you no longer have the ability to require the landowner to provide access to the general public to the river. So I think there's some incorrect analyses going into this. And again, the planning department generally does a terrific job, and I just think this one kind of got past them. Also, this request was made a couple of years ago by an engineering firm who represents developers. Since that time, the county has agreed with the urban growth boundary changes made for the benefit of the city of Pasco, and we county members have basically transferred several thousand acres of land in this area to the city of Pasco's jurisdiction. So there is plenty of land within the city where developers, that was former county land, that the developers can build PUDs on planned unit developments if they so wish. There's no need for Franklin County, which is primarily a farm-related county, and whose citizens are proud of that heritage and proud of the open spaces that come along with that. No need for the county to change their planned unit development rules in a way that will encourage greater density out in that area, impacting all the current residents and the future residents who will need to have access to greater roadways, greater capacity roadways because of the 28% potential increase in number of residences that can be built, the need for parks, all the amenities that go along with suburbanization of an area. And I think this really needs to be rejected as a proposal. There's simply no driving need by developers to have this done, and it is very detrimental to the large number of people who have moved into that area seeking the kind of wide open spaces and larger lots that are currently required. And I acknowledge the current PUD rules do allow the same 120% increase if a PUD is built, but the rules also have an offset to that by requiring the 35% open space, which makes a developer not as interested in doing the PUD. And here we're changing the game piecemeal, only changing the rule that kind of limits the use of PUDs and just providing another method for a developer who might not be as interested in the long-term interests of the citizens of Franklin County with a way to stuff more houses on a certain piece of land. And that's not all of them. As I say, I live near the work done by Randy Mullen, and it was, a very nice development with very large lots. And I also tell you that this is not just a hypothetical concern about a greater number of houses going in. You will note that there is a proposal coming before the Planning Commission next month for a conditional use permit for a Riverview, I think it's called, water system. And it is supposed to support up to 600 houses in that area. And the map that was associated with the documents submitted by that requester shows that it utilizes the PUD additional lot allowance as saying we could have up to 1.2 units per acre of houses. So I'm not just raising hypothetical concerns, I'm raising a real concern, and those of you who are interested in the long-term benefits of keeping this county somewhat of a rural county with the farming emphasis and the feeling of open space that our large lots require, I hope you'll consider it. Also consider, if you make this change, should a developer come in and request a zoning change to go from the 1 acre lot requirement to half acre, which in fact we had one developer do a couple of months ago, and the planning department appropriately advised them and took the position that that is inconsistent with the Franklin County Comprehensive Plan. But if that had gone through, then we're talking about a 20% increase from a half acre would allow like 240 houses on a given 100 acres of land. So this change has ramifications for the future depending on how the zoning rules change, but the 1.2 increase in allowable housing units on it doesn't go away. It goes with a reduced lot size if zoning is ever changed. So I honestly know that I have spoken to many, many neighbors, many of which submitted comments to the Planning Commission, but were perhaps not well understood, and I was out of state when the Planning Commission had their meeting, so I couldn't talk to them about it. It turned out there were only 4 Planning Commission members there, one of whom is a employee of the requester for this zoning matter, and while that's not per se unallowable, it was difficult to see that this got recommended to you by a Planning Commission. They only had 4 of the 7 quorum members at the meeting, and one of them being the employee of a firm making the request for this thing. So I really sincerely ask you to deny this change. There's no good reason for it. It's detrimental to the current citizens of Franklin County, and it could have unexpected impacts to other parts of the county as well, where a PUD might be proposed. And I believe that there's an administrative issue with the failure to include some of the comments that were submitted in this matter. So thank you very much, and I'm open to questions if you have any.
Thank you.
Here's a copy of my information. I had originally, I'm an old guy. I admit I'm not as sharp as I used to be, but I had referenced my June 6 comments as not being included in the record to you today. It was actually my June 18th comment letter that was not included, and so I have attached that June 18th comment letter in the packet.
Thank you. Is there any questions?
Sir, I didn't catch your last name.
Carosino, Carosino. And I did try and send an email to all three of you last night. However, it doesn't include the reference to the June 18th comment letter that was missing because, again, my thought process was not as sharp as it should have been last night.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you. Yeah.
You've invited questions.
Yes.
I'm well familiar with the area you're talking about, Terrace
that.
Drive. I've in fact looked at property there myself over the years.
Next door to my house, as I understand.
I'm sorry?
I believe you once looked at the house next door to where I live. 110 Terrace Drive?
Based on the address, likely so.
Yeah.
So, you raised a number of issues, and I just want to be sure that I'm clearly understanding what you're telling us, and I'm not operating on an assumption.
Okay.
In the Planning Commission meeting in which they voted to forward this to us.
Yes.
If I understood, you said there are 7 members, only 4 of whom were present.
Yes.
And of those 4 being necessary for a quorum out of 7,
Yeah.
one of those voting members is a current employee of the applicant.
That's correct.
Okay.
I didn't say that was illegal or anything, but
No,
it's just a fact.
Just fact, right. As for the assessment as to whether that does or doesn't violate the rules, I can
Yeah.
deal with that piece, but I
Yeah.
just wanted to be sure I had the facts right.
Yes, yes.
And you submitted a letter on June 18th. Was that ever acknowledged by anybody that would give evidence that it was actually received? The planning department?
I don't
or-
believe I got an acknowledgement back. I sent it both to the planning inquiry address and to Alan Gunderson.
Okay. All right. I think it's reasonable to assume that it probably was received, but if you had something specific, that would be of
Yes.
interest as well.
I'm sorry, I don't.
No,
know
no,
that.
it's great. I think you shortchanged yourself on your ability to communicate these precise details. I think you articulated the situation quite well. I think that's all I've got for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you. Anybody else?
George Dockstetter, here on behalf of the Tri-City Association of Realtors. This proposal for PUDs is another tool for developers to develop limited, and I do mean very limited, area of Franklin County. Hopefully it could be expanded, as I've suggested in the past. But this is another tool, and it doesn't mean every developer is going to use a PUD, because they have to weigh the cost of whether putting the 15% of open space into a park or a horse facility or something that's usable to the neighbors that are the people that are going to move in there are willing to pay for it. Yes, it's a possibility it could increase housing 20%, but that's one of the biggest costs we have in housing is the land cost. It's basically 25% of the loan package when a builder goes in there to borrow money. So anything to help increase the ability to develop more lots in a set deal such as a PUD is just another tool for the developer that's a possibility. And anything that'll help lower those costs will just reflect to the bottom line on the housing cost and the availability to residents of Franklin County. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good morning, Commissioners. Peter Harpster, 2815 St. Andrews Loop, Suite C here in Pasco with Octera Engineering. So I just want to start off by saying, if you read this, you see that I do work for Octera Engineering, the applicant, represent Big Sky Developers, and am one of the county planning commissioners. And so that's led to a lot of, it's sort of a running joke on the planning commission because I end up recusing myself from probably half our meetings. When this item came to the planning commission in, I believe May was the first time when we first discussed it this year, I initially recused myself because I was unsure if I needed to or not, and I wasn't sure on the differences between a quasi-judicial matter and a legislative matter. Mr. Bratt informed me I didn't need to. Because I was unsure, I decided to recuse myself just to be safe. And in the interim, before the next month's meeting in June, met with two different attorneys, including our own, read at length on MSRC and what they had available as far as needing to recuse myself, and determined that I did not need to because it's a legislative matter. And so with that, though, deeply appreciate Mr. Carosino's comments, and he typically comments on a lot of applications, and we sincerely appreciate it because it helps us to make sure that we're submitting applications that are in compliance and that take into account neighbors' thoughts and concerns. And one item of note is that Mr. Randy Mullen, the developer he mentioned, is a client of ours, and he lives out in that area. Big Sky Developers, who initiated this application, they live out in the area. And so they're not just money-grabbing developers looking to make a profit. These are their communities. And that's why this came out. The PUD, as it stands right now, at 35% land being dedicated to open space, makes it almost impossible to have any kind of a profit. And that's why there's been none in Franklin County. Not only do you dedicate the 35% to open space, there's 20 to 25% dedicated to right-of-way, roads, and in some areas sidewalks and whatnot. And that leaves very little room for actual development to take place. Some land is already suitable for 1 acre lots without any open space, but our clients, Big Sky Developers, want to do development that does include open space. And it actually, to Mr. Carosino's point, a county-like atmosphere, this helps with that a lot. And the map that Mr. Bratton had up there kind of shows that. One of the conceptual designs that we submitted that Mr. Carosino referred to does show sort of an outer circle of homes with a big open space in the middle. And some of the ideas that we've had for that open space, again, this is just a conceptual idea right now. We haven't submitted application materials. That would, again, go to the Planning and Building, then the Planning Commission, of which I'd completely recuse myself from, and then to you folks. And but some of the ideas that the developers have tossed around for that one is native landscaping. So there's gently rolling, not even hills, but it does slope a little bit different areas, creating walking paths through there, and then increasing the hills towards some privacy, and leaving some of the natural vegetation. That's beneficial in a lot of ends. One, it decreases the amount of homes that would be in that area. Two, it leaves natural vegetation like shrub steppe, which is a protected plant. And sorry, I'm reading through my chicken scratch notes that I took. With the comment about higher end homes, a proposal like this absolutely will end up with higher end homes. The recent development we did, 1 acre lots sold for at minimum $275,000, and the homes being built on there, as Mr. Carosino stated, are north of $700,000 and $800,000. When you have the map like was up there, when the homes are close together like this, you're going to have to build smaller homes. When it's like this and less land going to open space, you're going to be able to build bigger homes. And so those homes will be like in kind to what is already out there and what's been developed in the past. There is a great and desperate need for additional housing, and just a week and a half ago at the City of Pasco's Planning Commission meeting, the Community and Economic Development Director, Mr. Gonzalez, stated that a new update to their comprehensive plan is due in 2026, and as part of that plan, they will be applying to extend the UGA boundaries even further into the county. And so, development's coming whether people like it or not. Development like this, even if that UGA was extended, this is in closer compliance with what the City of Pasco and closer jurisdictions are doing. Send the application materials. Grant County has a open space requirement of 35%, which is what we have now. They're a much less densely populated county than Franklin is. More similarly populated counties, Spokane and Yakima, have a 15% requirement. Pasco has a 15% requirement, as well as the city of Kennewick, and then Richland and Benton County have no requirement. Apologize, I'm gonna click myself here. The comments being included, so Mr. Bratt could speak to this. The meeting that we had in June was not a public hearing. That public hearing had been held in 2020, and like he stated, people got busy. We forgot about it on our end, and one day went to find the records for this and realized, oh, it hasn't been brought any further. But that was the time for comments, of which comments were received and brought to the Planning Commission. Because it'd been a couple of years, they didn't have to, but staff said, let's go back to the Planning Commission because there's 3 new members on there and present it to them again, make sure they have an understanding of what this application is. And though, like I mentioned, that first meeting I recused myself and didn't need to, and there was a lot of confusion of what the open space meant, and those are questions I probably could have answered, but it gave staff time to explain to the other commissioners exactly what the application did. It's also worth noting that although there were only 4 commissioners, including myself, present at that meeting, there was 1 on the line, and so we had 5 voting commissioners at that meeting. Again, there was in your packet, there's a page and a half of meeting minutes discussing me not recusing myself and my in-depth research and phone calls with several people to ensure that I didn't need to. Because again, to the comments that we received, there's always a lot of comments that say, Mr. Harpster is employed by the applicant and he's on the Planning Commission. There's not a single meeting that I don't recuse myself from when it's our application, recuse myself and remove myself from the room. And I certainly don't recuse myself and then turn around, stand at the podium and present it to my fellow commissioners. So take a great deal of care with that. There's several goals and policies in the comp plan that this amendment helps to further. And I was going to read all of those. I won't because of time, but there's 6 specifically mentioned. And the other note that I'll make is that the reduction still meets the intent of Franklin County Code 1758, which states that the purpose of a PUD is to provide opportunities for innovation and creativity and flexibility in land development. When those ideas are brought to planning and building, and we've had numerous conversations with Mr. Bratt and his staff about this, we can submit, I guess theoretically we could submit plans for a roller coaster park in the open space, and when we come to plan and building, they're going to say, nobody wants that, your application's denied. What we'd be doing is creating we've already talked conceptual ideas that we think staff and the Board of County Commissioners would support, and it's very simple things like benches, walking paths, pocket parks. We've considered a park with swings and slides, but there may be some families that enjoy that, but there may be other family units that don't enjoy the noise from a park. And so trying to find something that benefits a wide variety of different family units and people groups, if you will. But it is important that today's just the amendment. Any project proposals would be very heavily discussed with staff and then with planning commission. There'd be another opportunity for public comment at that meeting, and then that application would then come to you gentlemen where there'd be another opportunity for public comment. The reduction simply provides more space for residents. It seems backwards, a reduction providing more, but as Mr. Bennett already explained, which makes it more desirable. Instead of having, all these homes super close together, they're spread out more, and then there's space right there that's allowed for the residents there to enjoy. So one complaint that we hear often on the planning commission is there's no parks in Franklin County. Well, even though the public wouldn't be able to enjoy walking past our park or whatever, the residents in that area would. And maybe there's residents that have young kids that want to live in the county, but also want to enjoy a park. Well, now they don't have to drive 10, 15 minutes into town to enjoy a park. It's in their backyard. I believe that's it. As Commissioner Peck mentioned, this would create an opportunity for ADUs, something that's definitely needed. If that was something that was not desirable by the community, then CC&Rs could be created to prohibit the use of those. So there's all this really does is allows a lot of flexibility, and that flexibility would be more clearly defined when a proposal is brought forward. I think that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I would just like to clarify, I did not raise any issue with regard to Mr. Harpster acting on this particular proposal. I just noted his affiliation with the firm, and my written comments didn't object to him acting as well. But I do believe that he's incorrect in saying that the Planning Commission action this summer was not a public hearing. It was, in fact, advertised as a public hearing. The date for the public hearing was changed because I believe they couldn't get a quorum together for the first date you were going to have that Planning Commission meeting. Isn't that correct, Mr. Bracken? And then the public meeting was, the public hearing was held. And so my comments were submitted to a public hearing activity.
Okay. So in April.
April
is
11th.
When this was brought back to the planning commission, and we had received comments then. I'm seeing, so we have your April 23rd comments, I think, or whatever. We do have comments in the packet from you.
Yes.
Do you have my June 18th is what I'm asking?
That's what I would have to double check. However,
All I seen was the April 11th in this packet.
and so I would have to look into, or the what regarding that. I think what might have been I don't know. I would have to check.
Thank you.
Because those initial comments that were submitted, they were not ripe, I guess you could say. They had been submitted prior to a meeting that was not the public hearing. Then we reestablished the public hearing because at the April meeting, it was clear that the planning commission wasn't ready to take action on that item. I didn't feel comfortable that they had enough information, so we reset the hearing date. The initial hearing date was obviously the first Tuesday. We could not obtain a quorum, so we moved it out to the 20th, or I believe it was the 20th. So I would have to, we were getting comments throughout that whole time period. So I will, if we did not include, or your June 18th comments were significantly different than your April 11th comments, I don't know. I would have to go back and look into the record, but generally my staff does. And if we didn't, it may have been an oversight in that they grabbed the wrong one, as opposed to your, instead of grabbing the June one, they grabbed your April one. I would have to go check with them.
I think they included my June 6th, but then when the public hearing was established and date changed to the 20th, I submitted updated comments that.
Yeah, so if that is the case, I apologize, but I would not know off the top of my head why those were not there, but that is my guess, is that they thought they had grabbed them all and they missed one.
But I don't believe Mr. Harpster has any factual basis for the statements he made in the responses here. For example, that the prices of a planned unit development house will be substantially more than the prices of the houses on the 1 acre lots there. I think, quite honestly, the reverse is going to be true. Because they're going to be stuffing more houses on a specific piece of land, and it'll become less desirable than the people who are buying these large lots like the Ranch at River Ridge area that Randy Mullen developed north of Fanning. And I stand by my comments. This is not good policy. It's not consistent with Franklin County's long-term goals. It will not foster opening public access to the river by members of the general public in Franklin County, which is something you dearly need as you transition the area from Dent to Sagemore Farms into residential development, and your current policies with regard to subdivisions. 1 acre lots does require some access to the river being introduced for the benefit of the general public, not just for the subdivision. So, I wanted to make those clarifications, and I continue to ask that you vote down this change proposal.
Thank you. Anybody else wanting to weigh in on this public hearing? Anybody on the phone? So, Commissioners, you have any more questions before I close this with Derek?
So, Derek, you're unable to tell us here today, without some further research, whether or not the gentleman's comments were included in the record for the Planning Commission?
My staff put together the packet.
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get clarity. And consequently, you have no way of knowing here today what the significance or weight of his comments might have been. Might not have changed anybody's mind, might have changed somebody's mind. There's really no way to know.
Not, I wouldn't know off the top of my head. I mean, I've seen comments from Mr. Caracina before, and they're
Right.
always very much like what we heard. I mean, they're not just, I don't want it. They explain the rationale
Thoughtful.
and reason. Yes, thoughtful. But yeah, it's, we did get the multiple comments. Like I said, I don't know. I'll have to check with them on why one of them's not there. So I don't know if one was replicative or they, I don't know. So I would have to check that.
The process is pretty important to me, as you know.
Yep.
And I will acknowledge that even the appearance of fairness doctrine in the state of Washington on land use matters only applies on quasi-judicial matters, not on legislative matters. And it's already been spoken to, but there's the overt issue of conflict of interest, but then there's even beyond that the standard of appearance of fairness. And
And there's no timeline on this, meaning if the board would like us to kind of get that a little.
For me
for more
personally,
information, we can put this off a little bit and bring that, get you guys that information and make sure that everything is, that you're satisfied with the information you have.
yeah,
That's our
so
goal.
for me personally, I have difficulty supporting any action until I have a reasonable level of certainty
Yep.
that we haven't violated the process somehow. And when there's a suggestion, I won't even use the term allegation, but when there's a suggestion that perhaps we didn't, I think that discretion warrants that we get the facts before we proceed. If for no other reason, then the cost and consequences and delays of an appeal and a potential quasi-judicial action then in an appeal or a closed record hearing complicates things further. So I think we invest time up front to just find out if in fact the record is flawed and whether or not there is a reason to be concerned.
Mr. Harpster?
I'm just looking at the planning commission packet that was sent out by Mr. Gunderson, planner with the county, and they did include Mr. Carosino's comments from both June 6th and June 18th.
And that's why I'm a little confused, because if generally what we do for your packet is we take the planning commission packet and we just give you the planning commission. So that's why I'm trying to track as to whether or not those things. So the planning commission did get it, but the question is whether the board got it, and if for some reason it disappeared. That's my understanding. That's the question at this
Is there-
point.
I take it from your earlier remarks that while we don't want to delay things needlessly, there is not an urgency attached to this.
I mean, there is, in that the applicant submitted it a while back, and they're probably waiting for an answer. But
Okay.
legally speaking, whereas with quasi-judicial process, you start running into some more timeline requirements and LUPA stuff, this is a legislative action, and the board can, and the planning commission, you can continue, you can discuss this as much as the board needs to feel comfortable with when they make their decision. So, whereas quasi-judicial, it's one hearing, open, then closed, and then you got to make your decision. That's not the case with legislative actions. It's a legislative action. This is setting policy for the county, and it's setting policy
Yes.
until such time as it changes, so potentially forever. So my desire is always for the board to be making those decisions based on the information that they need to be comfortable making that decision. And if that's not the case, then we're always happy to go back and make sure we get you the information that it makes that the case.
So my comfort level necessarily includes ensuring that anyone who's provided comments, that those comments are properly included in the record and they've been heard, and that if that's not at the top of my list, it's close to it. So would like to have that simple assurance.
Mr. Bratton, I went through this whole packet. There's only one letter in here from,
I thought there were two in there. All right, I will.
I've only seen one, and then I also looked at the roll call and the vote on this. There was only two people present, Mr. Harpster and Gruatines, and then there was two people called in, Didier and Knifton.
Right, but those are all present.
Those are four, yes.
Oh.
So there was only four people there that voted on this. The other three were absent, Corrales, Lowell, and Vincent. Also, what was the letters that came in that were against and for? Because all I've seen in here is letters against.
And frankly, that's generally what we get.
You
We
don't
don't know, on any project, we almost never get
How many
support
did
letters.
How many did you get against? Because I counted.
Well, I believe all of the public comments from the citizens, the residents, I believe all of them were against. That's just, like I said, that's what we get. People that support projects, for whatever reason, don't tend to send comments. Because I guess they're not concerned about that action, so they don't need to speak to it. But when there's concerns regarding a proposal, those people are more likely to send in comments because they have that concern.
And if we leave this open, we can receive more comments, correct? If we don't close this today, if we leave it open, we can continue to comments on this?
Yes. Yep. I don't know that anything would prohibit that from occurring.
Right. And so therefore, to make the right decision, I too don't feel comfortable making a decision today.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Peck.
I support the suggestion that we keep this hearing open, whatever the proper condition is for it in the interim, and set it for further discussion at a date to be determined as soon as planning staff is able to address some of these questions.
I mean, I could potentially bring that to next meeting. I mean, it's basically going to take me, go to my office, go through the comments, reprint them, make sure we have everything, and get that out to you. I mean, I could, by day's end, you would have that information. If you desire, I can be set to bring this back. Or if we do it from the dais and we set a date certain, we don't have to go out for additional noticing. If we do it to a date to be determined, then we've got to send out the new notices and everything, notifying folks that this is where you can come to speak still.
But you don't have to send that notice until a date is identified.
Correct.
And if we are to recess this hearing and address it, say next week, if we set a date certain, you don't feel that you have to put out another notice of the date for it to be continued?
Right, because you're doing it, you're notifying. So that.
I'm not sure that this meeting, Derek, I'm not sure that this meeting meets the requirement, but perhaps it does.
That's, yeah.
Chime in on that. I
If
guess
you would, yeah. Just for clarification on that.
I'm a little bit confused about where we are in the code.
Yeah.
So
we've-
are we in 1784? Because 1784 deals with amendments and rezoning.
Okay.
And that's kind of how I'd analyzed it before, is that this is under 1784, but planned unit development isn't a zone.
No, it's a zoning code.
Right, but it kind of looks like it's more of a mechanism for achieving a subdivision. So it's more
Right.
like a subdivision code.
But we're amending our county ordinances, so it's a legislative action.
So are we amending under 1784, which is for, here, I have it right here.
Well, the code we have here is section 17.58.080.
Right.
Is that 84?
That's the section we're amending, but 1784 deals with a procedure for zoning amendments. And so I was just looking through the findings that the Planning Commission was making, and it looked like they were following 1784. The reason why that's important is if we are following 1784, then the hearing that the Planning Commission held was the open record hearing, and we're limited to a closed record hearing before the board. So I don't know that we could even take
Public
new
comment on it.
testimony. But that kind of,
did amendments to county code become quasi-judicial?
they're not. I'm not saying they are. No, you're missing the point. What I'm getting at is whether or not we can leave the record open or not. If we had an open record hearing and it was closed, then there's due process concerns in terms of reopening the record and taking new testimony. There's also an appeal mechanism there. If someone was aggrieved by the Planning Commission's determination, they would have had 10 days to appeal that and then sort of reopen the record. And so I was sitting there combing through that, scratching my head, figuring, well, if that's not the section we're dealing with, then what section would be dealing with?
And Mr. Briggs, whether we recess the hearing or close it and reopen seems to be a significant legal differentiation. So you said if we close it, and I agree, but if we recess it, I don't know that it does.
Right. I don't know that we can reopen the record if we're in 1784,
We're operating under Title 14.
Title 14.
That's what we were using.
Okay.
This
Yeah.
is Title 17.
That's the zoning code.
Okay.
And I'm not sure, and in the zoning, frankly, I'm not sure why there's an amendment process in the zoning code. That's not an appropriate placement for it. This is why we're doing a massive rewrite of the zoning code, because there's a lot of things. We adopted Title 14, which we didn't have at the time that the zoning code was written. So we developed Title 14, and that's the process that we utilized. And under that, we interpreted this to be a legislative action because, well, frankly, I've never heard of ordinances of this nature not being legislative actions. And that was the interpretation that we got there. There's not a comp plan. That's all CPA stuff. Oops, sorry.
So they can't hold a public hearing, so you're right.
Because I've never heard of a board being bound on a regulatory change.
Right. So we're,
That's fine then.
we're in open public meeting or a public hearing, so we're fine with the public hearing. We can leave it open?
Yes.
Okay. Are the other commissioners in agreement?
Yes.
Okay,
So we will get you that
thank you.
ASAP.
All right. Appreciate it. And thank you, Mr. Briggs, for being here. It's nice to have him back on Wednesdays so that we can have our legal counsel in the room with us. Very, very beneficial. Well, I'm glad you're being thorough. Thank you.
Well, that's, yeah, I'd rather, 'cause, yeah, when you said 17, I'm like, what?
Okay, so at this time, we will move on and leave that open. We are at public comment. Is there anybody for public?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Peck.
I'd recommend that we put on the record that we are recessing the current public hearing, and that we'll reopen it at a date to be determined. Purpose for that is that if not, you're leaving it open without a process or a mechanism for people to come in and give testimony. So it seems to me like it'd be proper to recess it and then reopen it at a future date advertised.
Through the discussion, that was what was determined, that we're going to leave this public hearing open so people can comment, and we will bring it forth at a later date. So we'll recess until a later date to be determined.
Okay. So you're going to continue to accept new comments between now and some date in the future? Usually we set a date certain. Otherwise, well, you just keep getting comments potentially, and the record keeps changing and changing and changing. So that's
Well, one question I had, Derek, for you was that, of course, notice, and this has been prolonged for so long. Did we give out notice
yes.
to the paper? Before?
Oh, yeah.
So this is all,
This has been very noticed, yeah.
okay,
Because we kept having, every time we made a change, when we brought it back, all of that stuff.
okay. It's all been
yeah.
in the public.
Oh, yeah.
our
It's
paper.
been sent to
Okay.
Commerce. All of those aspects have been completed.
Okay, because this wasn't on the agenda when we had our agenda meeting. And it was on today, and that's what I was curious, is if we met all the requirements.
There were some questions regarding the noticing.
But we've met all the requirements?
Yes.
Okay. So it is a public hearing, and if the public wants to weigh in, I think that we should allow it.
Okay. I
Because
just,
we let them talk today.
right, it's just that, as I stated, the record will continue to evolve, and it will continue to evolve after I've submitted my packet. We will continue to get comments, and that's all. So I will coordinate with the clerk as to how to
But it
address
is
that.
open, so we can't
Yep.
deny them to comment either.
But like I said, normally there's a date certain set so that folks know that the event's going to occur at this time. You have until this time to comment. In this case, the comments will, just like I said, I will have to coordinate with the clerk to determine how they want to address the changing record.
Derek, are you comfortable that you can answer all these questions before next week?
As far as the restoring the making sure that we've got everything that was submitted to the planning commission to you guys?
Addressing all the concerns that have been put forth to you today, if you can address all of those with certainty before next week, I wouldn't have a problem with us
Date certain.
recessing the hearing until next week's meeting. I was trying to leave it open so as not to confine you, but
And
if
maybe
you-
2 weeks You know, I'm just, I guess my concern is the open-ended, just, like I said, based on that, comments received up to the day of the hearing would be potentially,
Well, maybe I'm
Part of the
mistaken, but
hearing.
it seems to me that you're confusing a comment period with a public hearing.
it's an open here.
Right?
You're right, they're not going to be submitting.
The comment
written
period
comments
closes
to-
before we go through this process. And so it's, you know, the hearing provides an opportunity for people to make additional comment,
Right.
so long as the hearing is in process. And it's open right now. Once it's recessed, it doesn't reopen until
You're right.
we reopen it. So I don't see
You're right.
the issue.
You're right. You're right. I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's all right. But if you feel that you can get answers to all those questions by next week, such that the board can commit to reopen this,
And I understand the questions would be, one, making sure that, you know, you have all the comments
Right.
that were submitted.
and find out whether or not the record included those comments, all the comments that went to the planning commission and to us both.
Right.
Sounds like they went to the planning commission, but we need just to make sure the process is complete.
Yep. Okay.
All right.
All right.
So then really the only question, Derek, it sounds like, is do we recess and announce that we're reopening it
My
next
earlier
week?
concerns are gone now, because you're
Okay.
right, I was confusing. It's recessed.
Right.
People
So-
will have an opportunity in the future to show up here to meet. It's not that we're not doing a
Okay.
extended
So
comment
you don't feel
period.
you need it next week?
I can get you that information in that amount of time. I want to do what the board's comfortable with. But yes, I would not have an issue or a problem getting that information.
I don't think we
Um,
should artificially delay the process, but I don't want to commit to next week unless you're
That's fine. Let's
saying
do
that
2 weeks.
you can meet the requirement.
Let's do 2 weeks.
Okay.
Okay.
I would suggest 10 days. So 2 weeks.
Okay. Sounds good.
So not next Wednesday, not the 30th, but the 6th or the 7th, whatever that day is. Okay.
September 6th. All right. Thank you. Takes us down to public comment. Is there anybody for public comment? Anybody on the phone?
No, sir, not at this point.
Anybody in the room? Public comment? Come forward, please.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, wanted to introduce myself. I'm Michael Robitel, just recently installed as the Mayor Colotis, and want to let you guys know about that change in leadership.
Thank you.
Do you gentlemen have any questions for me about anything?
Questions?
Not a question, but thank you for being here. I think it's important, and if there's anything the county can do to assist you in your new position, I hope you will be quick to ask.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Anybody else for public comment?
Good morning, Commissioners. Is this the appropriate time for me to talk on the ARPA funds?
Yes.
Oh, it is, okay. So I'm Steve Cooper, Franklin County Fire District 4 Fire Chief. And I guess it's been looking to me like the squeaky wheels have been getting the grease, and I haven't been squeaking much on the ARPA stuff. I went to all the meetings earlier in the year. A lot of comments were made, well, what do you want? What do you need? There's a big difference between need and wants. And I really feel our fire district has really managed itself and been fiduciary responsible of its funding. So I kind of just laid back in the shadows a little bit and figured some of the other fire districts in the hospital district were probably more in need of funding. Then I made assumptions on how it was going to play out. It didn't play out kind of the way some of us had been talking. We really anticipated that maybe the ARPA funds would have been given to the group in North County, Fire and EMS, so we all could have sat down and said, okay, what's the best use of the funds? I need to buy something Franklin One doesn't have, Franklin One maybe buy something I don't have, something like that. Then when I seen in the paper the funds were being dispersed out, I'm like, I messed up, because I never did apply earlier on. And so I thought, well, I screwed up. Well, then I seen Franklin 5 apply, I believe it was in March or April, and got funding. Now I'm like, oh man, I really screwed up. So then I got on the phone, started making phone calls, talking to people. Wasn't getting much response. I was told the ARPA funds were all gone, don't apply. They've all been dispersed out. Then I ran into another fire chief from Franklin County, and he said, well, now that everybody in North County has got their ARPA funds, I'm gonna go ahead and go down and apply and see if I can get something. Because his budget's a lot bigger than mine, and so he wanted us to participate first. I'm like, well, I didn't participate, I didn't get anything, I'm told the money's all gone. He told me it wasn't all gone. So I guess I'm down here to be a squeaky wheel. It's really important. I've sent the commissioners out and Mr. Gonzalez an email with, I can leave a copy for you guys, of what we're requesting. And I hope you've all had a time to read through that email and my request. It's the smallest out of all of them. I don't believe in being greedy. I believe in sharing with others and work together. I just want you to know how imperative it is for the constituents of Fire District 4 to receive this money. We all see what's been going on in neighboring counties, Spokane right now, and it's been going on for the last 8-10 years, these small communities getting caught by wildfires. Basin City in my fire district was caught by one of those 3 years ago. But due to the diligent work of our firemen, which are all volunteers, and we do have some decent apparatus right now, we only lost one house and 2 outbuildings, 2 shops. But it was not easy. We worked our butts off all afternoon. I requested help from the Tri-Cities. There was no available resources to help. We were on our own. You know, we do use that term mutual aid a lot. We work together. I've been in Benton County 3 or 4 times this year helping those folks. You know, we were over at the Bickleton Fire helping those folks. We all work together and help each other, but when you have an event that happens like happened, you know, 3 years ago on Labor Day weekend, I was on my own. I felt like on an island by myself, watching the community I've grown up in gonna burn down. So I'm just stressing, I guess, to you guys how important this is. Is there any room left in the ARPA funds? Do we have a confirmed answer?
Well, this is a public comment, and so we're not supposed to interact.
okay.
So we have got your email, and ARPA funds are not all gone, and we're considering it.
Okay, great.
We'll be in touch.
I want to be the squeaky wheel. I kind of, you know, I got busy farming and dropped it, and then all of a sudden I start reading in the paper, everybody else is getting money, and I'm like, uh-oh, I got to get going and do something, get a little more proactive. So
Thank you for coming in.
appreciate you. Thank you.
Anybody else for public comment? Nobody on the phone?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll move down to Commissioner Administrator updates.
Yeah.
Oh,
Name's Kim Pauly, Commissioner for District 4.
yes, sir.
And I want to stress we are frugal with our money, and this would really help us out because our budget generally is budgeted out for the money we receive in. So, I mean, there's not a lot of special funding going around. I worked in the fire department for a number of years, and so just an example, I got our SCBAs from Kennebec Fire. You know, so we try to use our money appropriately, and we try to go out. Right now I'm in the process of getting some radios for us too, through another agency. So we're very frugal with our money, but I mean, this would definitely help us out. We're entertaining the thought of having to build a new fire station, which of course won't be cheap, and we'll have to, you know, somehow try to work that into our funding too. But our equipment, it's getting older. The last time we got a new equipment was 2018, so our newest rig is 5 years old. So it definitely helped us out. Any questions?
you.
I guess.
Hey, it's public comment.
Okay.
We're just taking comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Is there anybody else for public comment before I close it? Okay, we're closing public comment. Go down to Commissioner Administrator updates. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair. It's been a busy few days. Had the opportunity to start the transition between the Harris White Leisure Group and SVM. Yesterday, the county HWA SVM met via Zoom for the next steps, and HWL plans to take over on October 1st. Also had a chance to meet with HWL to talk about their vision and next steps for about an hour and a half yesterday. So they're really excited about this process. They're already working on hiring a building manager for the center that is from the Tri-Cities. The other agencies involved in the HAPO Center, obviously it's a team effort. I've connected HWL with the city of Pasco and their city manager, who's shepherding a meeting that'll happen relatively soon. The HAPO Advisory Board Chair had a chance to meet with HWL yesterday, and they're going to call a special meeting for September to meet that group and get that process going. HWL, I've connected them with the Hockey Youth Association that rents the facilities, so they're really excited because HWL has a real expertise in hockey. Several of their group members are owners in the Idaho Steelheads, so that they'll be able to leverage their expertise there. They're also scheduled to speak with Jeff Carbo, owner of Clubhouse Sports, in the next couple of days. So really figuring out the way they can utilize that arena to generate some revenue. So Jeff Carbo says he's willing to work with HWL really closely and hopefully really enhance that relationship. Personally, I'll meet with leaders of the Hotel Motel Commission to get that group engaged with HWL. They're really excited about this team coming in. Also have working to set up a meeting with Visit Tri-Cities. So, in terms of contracts and things like that, they've got all the information in terms of binding site plans, the agreements between us and the city of Pasco. So working with Pasco to kind of take a good look at the financials for the past 3 to 5 years. So HWL really has a clear picture of what they're stepping into. So just feel like we're off to a really great start with this group. They've been really engaged and they're working with SVM. So really happy at the start of this relationship. They're truly professionals. Other things that we've got working on, Franklin County is going to be manning a booth at the fair in Building 2, so make sure you see those folks. The Sheriff's Posse is going to be out there, so they're going to have a big presence. So thank you, Monty and Sheriff Jim Raymond, for putting your guys out there. That was very helpful. The Coroner's Office, too, and elections will be out there as well. And big congratulations. We won a solar grant, and Shirley Jones was pretty integral in that. So we just got to figure out a place to put it on the HAPO Center. But, it's part of the Clean Energy Transformation Act, and it kind of helps with those energy credits. And it's where the world is kind of going with solar. So we won that grant, and it should enhance things out there.
Thank you. Commissioner Peck?
Met with the State Association of Counties staff to plan out or refine the legislative agenda for the 39 counties starting in January. That's been an ongoing process. Met with HUB and staff on benefits, which I believe my fellow commissioners are doing as well. Met with the 39 county representatives who are members of the State Legislative Steering Committee for Wasac. That was a follow-on, obviously, to the meetings with staff and the 39 counties. Got into the details of what issues we could move forward to the legislature that would be beneficial and generally acceptable to certainly the majority, if not all, of the counties. Had Benton Franklin Council of Governments Board meeting last Friday. Met with the Tri-Cities River Shore Enhancement Council last week. Yesterday, it feels like last week. Met their new Lieutenant Colonel, who is the new commander of the Walla Walla District for the Army Corps of Engineers, Lieutenant Colonel Kingslack. We talked about a variety of issues, not the least of which was potential shoreline reconveyance. Let's see, the Wasac virtual meeting yesterday online. Had a 2-hour meeting with the Washington Attorney General's Office attorneys on a HAFIC matter, and then a Benton Franklin Council of Governments audit entry meeting as well. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
Now, first, I just want to say thank you to the Economic Development Committee and the Strategic Growth Committee on doing the preliminary assessment of the RFPs for the HAPO Center. A lot of work went into that, and I just appreciate everyone's help that set on those committees. Also, last week had the HUD meeting as far as benefits, and also last week was the Board of Health meeting. And I also just want to mention too, the Ben Franklin Fair is going on. Please come out and see the booth that they have at the fair. And if you're going to the fair, I would suggest taking the Ben Franklin Transit. It's convenient. You don't have to pay to park. They drop you off at the front gate. It's a really good opportunity to try out the transit if you've never rode it before. They do a great job. That is my update.
All right, my update consists of budget review for the county, Board of Health meeting that Commissioner Mull and I both sit on, Columbia Basin Sustainable Water Coalition Board meeting, and of course our agenda meeting. And then today is a very special day because it's my mother's birthday, and I'd like to wish her a happy birthday. She's 92 today. And she shares a birthday with Commissioner Mullen, so happy birthday to Commissioner Mullen.
Thank you.
Found that out when he came into the board meeting, because I was told, so a very happy birthday to both of them. So that takes us down to administration office business. Do you have anything, Mr. Gonzalez?
Nothing today, sir.
And then we have another public comment. Anybody for public comment? Seeing nobody for public comment, nobody on the phone? No. Okay. Do we have any executive sessions?
Not today, sir.
Well, is there any other business for the good of the county? Hearing
Chairman,
none.
I have a couple of questions. It's all on
Perfect.
the same issue. I heard Mr. Gonzalez a few minutes ago tell us about how we've begun the transition to Harris White Group and having discussions about transition and meeting with various entities. I can't help but wonder if we aren't maybe getting the cart before the horse a bit. We've not negotiated with the Harris White Group as to the terms and conditions of a contract, and it seems to me that providing them some initial information, certainly, and providing financials, which are public record, things of that nature, I don't object to, but I'm not hearing any discussion about the actual terms and conditions of an actual contract. I'll give just one illustration of why I think that might be important. Under the current arrangement with SVM, it's my understanding that the county pays for 3 employees at the HAPO Center, and that the management piece held and operated by Kyle Simmons and Shirley Simmons is funded out of their $12,500 a month. And there's been no discussion or agreement or understanding that I'm aware of with the Harris Group as to how much staff they're going to be expecting the county to pay for at the HAPO Center. Is it going to be 2 managers and 3 staff? Is it going to be a full-time manager? I think I heard reference to staffing positions and management positions at the HAPO Center. But you know, if it turns out that the cost to the county involves additional positions beyond what we're currently paying, I think that's a critical issue for us to discuss, and it just seems like we're running headlong into introductions and transitions before we even have any agreement on terms and knowing what the costs would be to the county and who's going to pay for what. So I want to raise that concern on the record. I guess I've done that now, and that's all I've got. Thanks.
Okay, concerns have been raised. We will address them at the next meeting. So with that, is there any other business for the good of the county? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.